we are back. This is still Senate Government Operations, and it is still Friday, February 25th, and most of the state is being hammered with snow. So if people are driving in their cars while they're testifying, I hope that you have your hands free, because we would not want you to get in trouble. So we are going to go to, excuse me, S250. And this might seem like a bizarre way of dealing with a bill. We have had a walkthrough of this bill. Ben has given us a walkthrough of the bill, and I don't remember the date, but he did. And it is, the issues in it are all related, but pretty disparate, if that's what I want to say. So what we found in the past in dealing with bills that have a lot of kind of moving parts and a lot of things that aren't necessarily connected to the whole is to divide them up and to take testimony on discrete sections of the bill, so that we don't have to keep jumping back and forth. And that might seem odd to some of you who aren't used to dealing with this, but our committee has found that it's very helpful to do it that way, so that we can take testimony on one section, decide if this is something we want to go with, not go with, make changes, and then go on to the next section, so that we don't have to keep jumping back and forth. So today, what we're looking at is sections 3, 4, and 9 of S250. So I hope that makes sense to everybody. And we also, just for those of you who weren't with us when we did the initial walkthrough, section 2 is the whole section on qualified immunity. And as Ben knows, he's been dealing with that hours upon hours upon hours in the Judiciary Committee. So we're not going to take any testimony on that section at all, because he's working really hard with the Judiciary Committee on that issue. And it was put in here, I assume, just in case Judiciary didn't take it up, there would be some vehicle for it. So that's the way we're going to proceed here. And so we have on our list, again, quite a number of people to testify. And I'm going to start with section 3, which is found on page
on page 8.
Okay, yes, at the top of page 8 under section 3. And anybody can weigh in on this section. I would like to hear, I guess, first from those most involved in training, and that would be, I'm looking at my list here, Heather and Chris. I don't know, Heather and Chris, how you're going to do this. Eitan and Susanna. I think that, but anybody else can weigh in once we hear from those people, if that's okay. And committee, if you have any suggestions for doing this in a different manner, just let me know. So if we can start with section 3, which would change the number of training around around fair and partial policing policy from 4 to 10 hours. So I would jump first, I believe, to Heather. So Heather, if you would like to join us. We can't hear you. It's probably the snow. So maybe what we'll do is start with Chris and then maybe if you jump off and then come back in, it might clear it up. Okay, thanks. Okay, Chris.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Christopher Burkell, for the record, Deputy Director of the Vermont Criminal Justice Council. I will be fairly brief in my comments relative specific to Section 3 of the bill and relative to the draft, which includes 10 hours of fair and impartial policing training as required by this section, which would be every odd number of years. And I think in conversation with council staff, trainers, the Fair and Impartial Policing Committee, RDAP, and Susanna Davis, who was also on the council, is that not speaking on their behalf, but having conversations with all of those folks, is that I think that putting a number to any type of training just as a number for hours is not necessarily the best option to go, but doesn't really give us what that content of that training is. And setting an hourly number doesn't allow us to actually involve the partners that we want to involve in fair and impartial policing. And, you know, we've had conversations already with RDAP about their input, as well as using the equity impact assessment tool. And we want to involve those types of tools in all of the training that we do here. So I believe that the 10 hours was more concerning to us than actually determining what is the best content for that training and delivering that, and not just using a number. So that was the concern on the part of the council. And I see Heather's back, so maybe she might have other comments to that.
Thank you, Christopher.
Thank you.
We still can't hear you. Are you over in Pittsford? Maybe that's the problem. Rutland is really being hammered.
I'm the only one in Pittsford, but I believe Heather's comments that I'm getting from her that her audio is not working, that she doesn't believe that there's anything more that she wanted to add to that.
Okay, so then what I think I will do is jump to Eitan and Susanna to who are part of the helping to define the training and how it's implemented and how it's what's the word I'm given? That's not the word I want, but anyway, okay.
The curriculum? The curriculum?
No.
Okay.
How the training is done, but it doesn't make any difference. Eitan,
Execution.
Excellent.
yes. Okay.
Execution. Yeah.
Okay.
Hi. One of my main comments is to simply agree very strongly with Christopher and also, I guess, Heather about specifying the number of hours. I've spoken about this. I mean, I've spoken about this with Senator Rom Hinsdale as well, and we were both talking about the need to increase the number of hours of training. I am fully in agreement with that, but I also think that naming it and saying 10 is, I say as an educator, that's kind of iffy. I do some of this training at the academy, and there are days when, you know, I'm given 6 hours and at 5 we're really done. There are days where we go have 6 hours and we don't have enough time. It just seems best to sort of say something to I would say as a suggestion, that maybe there should be a focus upon increasing, I don't know, intensity and amount of training around matters of fair and impartial policing. And I would leave it there, and just say that ought to fit. One of the things I don't think we need to go into, I don't know who I thought I was talking to. I thought I was apparently speaking with people who wouldn't think that we should do this, that there shouldn't be more training. So I have all these notes here that I'm looking at now that are completely useless. So let me simply point out that now that we have an expanded criminal justice council, that matter of training should be left to that body, the amount of it, and it's also to its attendant subcommittees. And again, I guess the language of the bill should say something about increasing the focus upon FIP, but leaving the substance and structure of that training to the academy and to the council and other stakeholders. Vagueness in this instance, I think, can be a handmaiden to appropriateness. So that would be my suggestion. Now, the one other thing that I do want to add here, and I hate to be Eeyore, even though that's been my nickname for years, but as Eeyore, I have to say there are a couple problems here, and that isn't anything that we really can blame on anyone. There are so few sworn members at this moment that putting in extra training now, new training, I should say, is difficult. And I say that as someone who is a completely true believer in training and education, and certainly around fair and impartial policing matters. But the problem is that we're facing unprecedented staffing challenges. And it's very much impossible to pull people from public safety duties to intensely train about how to perform those self-same duties. It literally is a matter of taking people off the road in order to do this. And there are some problems with that. I did not understand that initially. I have come to understand it. I had developed a really, now I'm going to toot my own horn, really exciting and brilliant training for the Advanced Trooper School on the matter of fair and impartial policing 8 months after they had completed their training and had been on the road. We were not able to do it when it was originally scheduled, precisely because we couldn't take 10 people off the road at the same time. There was a question of coverage. There was a question of staffing. So in the end, a balance must be struck between what would be desirable and in some ways necessary and what is possible. That's reality, and wishing isn't going to accomplish very much. I can tell you that VSP is working both on recruitment and retention, but not enough has moved in regard to these challenges of which I speak to allow for what would be absolutely the best. And I think that's really all I need to say to you. I know you've got a lot of people lined up, and you need to hear from them.
Thank you. I'm going to make a suggestion here that I am looking at my notes from last time, and Susanna made the comment that it should be embedded in all aspects of training, and we might change this to say something like, on or before all law enforcement officers shall receive training as required by this section that is embedded in all aspects of training. I mean, I just throw that out as a comment. Yes, Senator Ram Hinsdale.
Yeah, I mean, I don't disagree. So, I mean, I think Eitan will appreciate this section was specifically in response to concerns he raised about not having enough time. And, you know, I think there's always a compromise, whether it's on hours or content or, you know, whatever the case may be. I think that the concern I have the most, and I've heard it echoed from other folks in law enforcement, is pedagogy, is that there are often times when they are doing an online training, it's non-interactive. you know, the whole point of this is to learn out loud. I think you can't really understand your own partiality and your own biases unless you're learning out loud and asking questions that you feel safe asking that change your assumptions and change the way you think. And I have heard from law enforcement themselves that they have experienced, if it's it's ongoing, like, you know, online modules. And, you know, I'm concerned about that pedagogy, because I don't think it helps someone with split second decisions or changing how they interact with people.
Yes, thank you. And Eitan, did you have a response to that? And then I'm going to jump to.
No,
Susanna.
I just clarification. I just wanted to make, Senator, you're talking about that the online stuff doesn't do what the in-person stuff is doing.
Yeah,
Am I making-
I think the only thing I'm wedded to is that pedagogy is so important in, you know, things around diversity and equity, not necessarily the number of hours. But if you had 2 hours of a deep conversation versus 2 hours of sitting online and looking at something, that's going to be really different.
Preaching to the choir. Preaching to the choir.
So I'm going to jump to Susanna.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I don't actually have much to add here. I'm also a little bit ambivalent about the change in the number of hours. We know that it's an issue of quality, not quantity. We've heard many times that people like the officer who murdered George Floyd in 2020 had completed 40 hours of crisis intervention training in 2016 and did a use of force training in 2018, right? So it's not necessarily about logging the correct number of hours, but rather about making sure that it is quality instruction and that it's being utilized and reinforced, and that it becomes so deeply embedded in everything that we do that you can't forget what you learned in the classroom because it's part of the day-to-day work. And so if we can find ways to thread fairness and impartiality through all of the work, then effectively the full workday becomes the training every day.
So the language that I suggested, does that help at all, or does that just muddle it up even more?
I think it does help. I think it does help. And I would be very curious and very eager to participate in figuring out who and how we make sure to make sure who are the people determining what embedded means.
Okay.
And what are the benchmarks that we're using to determine that? That may be a process that's already existing and I don't know about it, but if it is not, then I would be very eager to volunteer to participate in helping to shape what does it mean for it to be embedded.
So maybe it's best to just leave it, like not change it at all right now and just leave it as it is, and have you and Eitan working with the training, with the Criminal Justice Council training to make sure that that happens, instead of trying to be prescriptive here. Okay.
Yes, I would.
Thank you. Thank you. Does anybody else want to weigh in on this particular section? Dan?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Dan Fingus, Rights and Democracy. I just want to make sure embedding it obviously is the right way to go, and it makes total sense. But I think a tracking mechanism and making sure that it's really clear that departments aren't just saying that they're embedding it and then it's just like, oh, it's in everything. So we don't actually have to list the ways that it's actually embedded, and making sure that it's actually still being able to be tracked. And that way, if a department or an officer does have a complaint, we can actually look back at the record and see if they are doing the embedding properly, if there are things that they haven't done. So I think just making sure there's a mechanism for tracking would be really crucial to that.
Yeah, and I think that we could, I'm going to suggest that we can probably leave that detail up to Eitan and Susanna to make sure that but you're right. Thank you, Dan. That's
Thank you.
good observation. Yes, Senator Ram Hinsdale.
So I just so appreciate Eitan and Susanna, and I think so often if things aren't written down, then it's really up to them to keep pushing. And, you know, say, remember, we had this conversation. I just think, they can't be their own accountability mechanisms. So, I don't know if it's like, there is something about tracking best practices, reporting back, like modules and how this is being implemented and modified, but it so often happens that people of color end up having to be their own, drivers of this change. And I would hate to see that.
Thank you. I think we have to put some faith in the Criminal Justice Council to come up with the system and figure out how to do the tracking of it, because I certainly don't want to put language in here that tells them how to track. I don't know if that, it's Eitan, Susanna, Heather, Christopher, anybody want to?
Well, I was just gonna remark that I think that Senator Rahm Hinsdale's so right. I don't even know how to say how right she is, but she's so right. But I also think that we have the Criminal Justice Council. We have the entire academy. I think that there's a body of people here who are still to some degree untested because it's new. It's all new yet. And I think that the accountability, there's a lot of it there. There's a lot of it there. And I think that we simply all have to be aware that we need to do that with one another.
Great. Okay. Thank you. So, committee, are we okay that we won't change this section now? And next year, if any of us are back, we will ask for a report to come back on how the training is going and how they're accounting for the training as it's embedded, if any of us are back. Or we'll leave a note for whoever is back on the desk. Okay. All right, so can we jump to section 4, which is data collection? And I suspect that I'm going to ask first for Jeff Wallens, because I think that's where, there you are, to just walk us through how we do it, what this section 4 means.
Good afternoon. I appreciate the opportunity to meet with the committee today and provide a little bit of perspective, what I can. For the record, my name is Jeffrey Wallen, and I'm the director of the Vermont Crime Information Center. Currently, VCIC is responsible for the tracking of criminal incident data from arrest, arraignment, and conviction. And generally, that's understood in the most common language for that is the rap sheet. That's really what that's understood to be. So that's the data that we provide and we make available to authorized individuals for authorized purposes. For data elements such as and I'm going to use the term use of force, which is common in the national discussion right now, those aren't inherently part of a criminal history record because they may or may not ultimately lead to any kind of criminal charge, etc. If they do, then that information then becomes part of the individual's criminal history record. But we don't currently, at the VCIC level, track this type of data. It may be something that individual agencies track themselves, and they may use something like the Valcor Records Management System to do that. And if agencies were interested in standing up a statewide collection or analysis tool, particularly as it might interface with the federal use of force program, we would certainly be willing to partner with them on that. But we do not currently track anything in a centralized manner here at VCIC with regards to incidents that may or may not lead to criminal charges.
Okay, well, that was pretty clear. So I think then, does anybody have any questions for Jeff, or should we jump to Commissioner to find out? Oh, I think he's gone away. Yes, Senator Ram Hinsdale? So that we can find out how currently the information is collected and where it's kept.
Yeah, I mean, I guess my question is, but you could, right? Like there's nothing, if it was a directive, you could collect that information and you could have demographic information about people who might have been the recipient of that force.
Well, we currently, I want to be careful here because certainly anything is possible, with data collection efforts. The question is, where is the best place for that information to start? We certainly don't collect information on victims or anything of that nature. So we don't really have any kind of mechanism to track or collect or house that type of data. Again, I would think that likely the role for VCIC, the Vermont Crime Information Center, for anything of this nature would be to provide some assistance and expertise on agencies on how to gather that data, to leverage systems they may already be using, and then how to interface those in a collective manner. But I would be somewhat concerned about us standing up a brand new data collection effort, which is not really related or adjacent to anything we're currently doing.
Okay. So I think that maybe we lost the commissioner. I was hoping that he could tell us how this data is currently collected. I know that one of the things that has recently happened is that all the law enforcement agencies, I believe, are now using Valcor, so they at least are using the same system. But does anybody else care to weigh in on this section on, and even if you don't know exactly how we do it currently, if you'd like to just weigh in on what is being proposed here, that would be good. If anybody looking around to see who unmutes themselves. Falco?
Yeah, I'm happy to jump in. So
Sure.
for the record, Falco Schilling, Advocacy Director for the ACLU of Vermont. And I just want to say, overall, as we look at this bill, I know we are not looking at all the sections, but we're very supportive of this legislation and the intent behind all the different sections, but speaking specifically to the data collection piece, this is something that we'd be supportive of. I mean, if there's details to be worked out, we'd be happy to know more about those, but having more information about how law enforcement is conducted in our state is essential. We've seen recently, especially in the correction system, how essential that has been as we've gone through the Justice Reinvestment Project. And as we have better information about how we conduct law enforcement throughout the state, we can make better assessments of what changes might need to be made, what policies put in place are being effective, and how those policies are working. Especially, we've seen from this traffic stop data that since it's been collected, we've been able to see bias in these traffic stops across the state. We've been able to then work to try and address them, especially being able to go look department by department. And you can't address problems until you know they're there. So we'll quickly say we are in support of this language and in this section, and of more data collection in general, and making that available to decision makers and the public to have a better understanding of how their government and those tasked with promoting the public safety are operating. So those are our comments on this section.
Thank you. I do have a couple questions, and I don't know where to direct them, I guess, because I do know that we need to have some consistent data and that we need to have data collected, and that we need to collect the data and measure what it is we want to know, not just collect data for the sake of collecting the data, but so that we can measure what it is we want to, and then how we use the data once it's collected, and who has access to it. But unfortunately, I'm not sure how to go forward here now, because the devil is in the detail, and we need to know if this is the way we want to do it or not. I just do have a question. For example, And I'm not sure how it works, so I don't know. What I'm asking here is on the first part of it, it says that they shall collect data concerning roadside stops and law enforcement encounters resulting in officer-involved death or serious bodily injury. And then this is what should be collected, but we don't know if there's an incident involving death or serious bodily injury until after it happens. So then we can't collect the data. So are we saying that in every instance, whether or not there's death or serious bodily injury, this is the data that should be collected in every stop or every encounter? So, because how can you collect it afterwards? I don't know. So I'm just asking these questions about how this would work.
I'm sure there's a lot of paperwork to do if there's death or serious bodily injury as a result of an interaction with an officer. So I guess like them not knowing, just struggling with that. But I understand we don't have law enforcement here to talk about what happens now. I just can't imagine that they don't have to keep some paperwork on hand from that kind of incident. And they're already supposed to be routinely collecting demographic information from a visual and, approximate assessment.
Yeah, and I get that. I just wonder is if we're already collecting all the data, why do we need to specify that they need this data if there's an incident involving that? I mean, I don't know if they collect age, gender, and race of the driver on in all instances.
They're supposed to.
In all instances of
Wouldn't have traffic
encounters?
stop data if they
No,
did.
no, I'm not talking about just traffics. Oh, this is just traffic stops. No, this is all law enforcement encounters.
Okay, so yes.
this is the whole
we wouldn't have data if they didn't collect that information.
So then you couldn't collect it after the fact. I mean, I guess that's the concern I have is how this actually would work. Are we saying that we should collect all of this data for every encounter just in case there's because you can't, if there's an incident that you couldn't have anticipated when the traffic stop was made or the encounter happened, but you didn't collect the data because you didn't know there was going to be an incident, then how do you go back and collect the data afterwards? That, I guess those are some of the questions that I have about the way, and maybe Ben has some knowledge of how this works.
Well, hi, Madam Chair, Ben Novogrodsky from the Office of Legislative Counsel. I don't have direct knowledge of the procedures that occur when there is an encounter, but just as a point of clarity, the first part of this section is already in existence in law. What is E subdivision 1A? This was just changed really for the designations of it, but it's new subdivision B, and this is just the law enforcement encounters where death or serious bodily injury occurs. So it's not all law enforcement encounters. So just as a point of clarity there. But I think that question would probably be better directed at someone that works at a law enforcement agency or a DPS.
Okay. Yeah, I guess that's my concern is if we're already collecting it at every roadside stop, then that I understand that we are. But I doubt that we're collecting that at every encounter. And you don't know if there's going to be an incident when the initial encounter is made. So you don't go to a domestic violence and get everybody's age and gender and race and record it. And yet there could be a serious incident here that results in death or serious bodily injury, but you haven't collected the data first. So how do you go back and collect the data afterwards? Those are my questions, not questioning whether we need the data, but how it actually works in real life. So I guess maybe since we have no one here to address that.
I can chime in quickly and
Okay.
hopefully try and help clarify. And if there's any misstatements here, I hope someone will correct the record afterwards.
Okay.
But I believe that as part of the new use of force law that was passed, and then the rules and policies that were implemented along with that, that there is reporting on use of force incidents. So anytime that force is being used, I believe that there's data being recorded about that. And so I would imagine that if there is an encounter where a death or serious bodily injury is resulting, there would be some sort of force being used. And I think there's already some form of reporting requirement for that, but I will let someone else who's more directly involved speak to that. But I think that this is something where they might already be collecting some of this data, and this might be adding on top of that. But
Okay, thank you. That helps. But I have one more question for Ben. If A is already, or C, no, that's an E. E1 is already set in the language. We haven't added anything there, right?
Correct.
Okay. And it does say law enforcement encounters resulting in officer-involved death or serious bodily injury. Why do we need B? Because it just repeats the same thing.
Well, and just to clarify, so that portion, law enforcement encounters resulting in officer-involved death, that is a new addition.
I know.
Before it was just roadside stop data that was being collected.
But on line 15 on page 8, it says, and law enforcement encounters. It isn't limited to roadside stops. And then in B, the whole thing is repeated.
Well, so that's really just the construct. So it's adding that in E, and then in subdivision B of subsection E1, it's listing the type of information that would be collected in a law enforcement encounter involving death or serious bodily injury, which is not currently in the statute.
No, I don't
I'm
think
sorry if I'm not understanding.
Yeah, I'm not being clear here. So E1 says in all roadside stops and in all law enforcement encounters that result in death or serious bodily injury, right?
But it's not, okay, so not just roadside stops.
It says, right, it says on line 15, roadside stops and law enforcement encounters. So that's there. It's already covered. All law enforcement encounters that result in death or serious bodily injury are covered now in E1A. So why do we need B? Because it's just repeating what's in A. Am I wrong about that?
We're talking on page 9, lines 5 through 8.
Yes,
Okay.
it beginning on line 5 and going through line 8.
No, on page 10, I mean, page 9.
Yeah.
Are there, on line 10, it simply repeats everything that's in A. And I don't understand why we need that.
I don't see where B is.
So
B is on page 10 on line 4.
Correct.
Oh, well, I have a different version then. It is, if you look at section 4, there's E1A.
Right. And there's A.
And E1A covers all traffic stops and all law enforcement encounters that result in.
Correct.
Then if you go on and it lists for a bunch of things. Then if you go on to B, it repeats exactly what is
Right.
in.
But it's for law enforcement encounters versus roadside stop.
No. No, go back, please. Go back to E1.
Yeah, and it
It
says
said-
both there. You're right.
It says both. So why do
No.
we need to repeat it in B?
Sure.
That's
You know, I think
That's
you're
my
right. They're all the same. It
That's
does
my
say-
question.
Well, yeah, that's a good
that's
question.
that's my question. Why do we need to repeat it if it's already covered there?
Well, it could be consolidated, so it's drafted, so it's more concise. The difference is just the roadside stop data, it's referencing the driver as opposed to the decedent or the injured
right.
person. So there is that small change, but that could be changed, through drafting. It doesn't have to remain that way if it would be clearer in a way.
You
Oh,
could,
you're saying because in there it says driver and in the other one it says injured person. That's the difference.
Correct.
Okay. Okay, I'm okay then. It just seemed
repetitive.
silly to me to have to repeat the whole thing, but there is slight difference and it's probably easier to separate it. But yeah, I would take out law enforcement encounters in the first one then, because anyway, it doesn't have anything to do with roadside stops or drivers, but
It just sets up the whole section that it's going to address both those things. I think.
no,
Yeah, that was
Anyway.
the intent
Yep,
behind the
you're
drafting,
right.
is that it just sort of sets the stage, and then the one section, the subdivision A covers roadside stop data. Subdivision
one.
B covers law enforcement encounters.
sorry to be so dense.
No, it's,
No, I'm
Okay.
pretty much okay with all those, collecting all that data. I think we do need to have some information about how we use that data to help set policy or, and I don't know if we need something in here about that or not.
About how it's shared with us.
No, not how it's, I guess just some kind of a, it always, I always think of that we don't want to just collect data, that we want to be able, and how is the data to be used? And in helping both us to set policy and law enforcement to do their training. And so I
Well,
don't
and it
know.
should
if-
be publicly available so that the public can hold them accountable.
So is that a question for Jeff? How's that data analyzed and how's it then applied?
They don't collect this data. If you remember what Jeff said, he collects data on criminal records, not on incidents. This is not necessarily criminal, but
I thought VCIC held all the records.
no, he just testified that he didn't.
No, I heard, but I thought for some unknown reason that like public records, that they had all the criminal records in the reports.
But these aren't necessarily criminal records.
Right, they're just.
Madam Chair, sorry to interrupt, Mike Sherling from Public Safety,
Oh.
just letting you know that I'm on now. A staff member sent me a note.
I think I got my questions answered. I don't know if we need more, I'm a little bit torn here about what, and I apologize for taking all that time to, just because I'm apparently so dense.
No, you're not so dense. There's nothing dense about you. This is all kept in Valcor, right? I mean, so Valcor is aggregating all this data that as each department reports it after an incident, after an encounter, after a roadside stop. And who oversees the Valcor data?
So a couple of fragments from just the last 2 minutes that I've been able to hear. Senator Clarkson, you are correct. DCIC maintains criminal history information, which consists of records of criminal charges, convictions, and outcomes, but only things that result in criminal charges. The computer-aided dispatch and records management system, which is named Valcor, maintains the records of all law enforcement responses, encounters, reports, things of that nature for all but 2 agencies in Vermont. There are 2 who have opted not to use that statewide system. Not knowing exactly what fields of data you're talking about, I don't have any additional context to say what's collected relative to the discussion. But my sense is there's probably an intersection with use of force here, and I can report at the moment that of the 73 agencies on Valcor, there are at least 14 who are using some alternate mechanism to track use of force.
So I would, I'm gonna take a poll here of what we want to do. I would, because I think we need to spend more time on this. I think that Senator Rahm Hinsdale suggested that this should all be public information so that people can be held accountable. I'm not sure that we're doing a lot of identifying of the victim here and the driver, and I'm not sure if all that information wants to be public. It should be the age, race, and gender of the victim. I'm not sure that that is, but we need to have this further conversation, I believe. And it's almost 4:30 on Friday afternoon, and we haven't heard from people on this section yet. And we haven't even gotten to section 9, which is the false confessions or confessions based on false information. So what I'm going to do is suggest that we might want to look at 155 and that we come back. If we have 155 off our plate, we can devote a substantial block of time to 250 and address this and the remaining sections. Is that okay to everybody? I mean, I'm willing to stay here, but
I have
think
a 4:30, so it would be,
Okay.
I'd love to do 155 and come back to this, because I think we have to figure out, I think there are a lot of questions that we have to answer in this.
and then we can then I can make sure that we get the appropriate people in here, and maybe somebody can think about drafting something around, and I believe that this was one of the things that when we were talking before with Susanna Davis about collection of data was, and also with Eitan about why we collect the data, what are we trying to measure, and how do we use the data, and so that we could, if we can incorporate, if there are already policies out there around then that's fine. But if there aren't, then how do we maybe incorporate that into here? Yeah.
Oh, I mean, I was fixing my hair, but I absolutely err on the side of data liberation and making it publicly available. I mean, I think as we start, as Falco mentioned and others, we have made the grave mistake of thinking we don't have issues in Vermont because we haven't been collecting certain pieces of data and making them publicly available. And there are, as we've learned over the course of hearing Eitan's report and others, some really devastating disparities. I mean, almost as many Black kids are arrested as white kids in Burlington, even though they show up nowhere near that amount of the population. Black young men are represented 10 times more than their percent of the population in those charged as youth offenders in Chittenden County. So, we have learned some things that are so dramatic, and people have a right to know that, so that matches their feeling of what they're experiencing and their ability to have true participation in their democracy.
Yeah, I agree that there is that aspect, but I still want to have more conversation around what is public and what isn't. I mean, we just passed a bill that said that arresting agencies can't release the names of youth or any identifying information. And I questioned somewhat about why. And anyway, I think we need to have this conversation more. So we will schedule this for kind of initially, Gail and I have been trying to work on a schedule, and it is really hard to do because of the next week's schedule. But I think that
Madam Chair,
yes.
it's currently scheduled for, let's see, Wednesday, March 9th at 3:15.
Oh, okay.
And I have sent out invitations, so I think everybody on this call has probably gotten an invitation.
Okay, great. Okay, I guess we have a date. So,
Great.
All right, thank you. Thanks, Ben.
And Madam Chair, just one question. So before this, it seems like with section 3 that the committee indicated that there was no change to the law that needed to be made. Should I just strike that and I could circulate a new draft before the next meeting?
You can if you want, but if that's the only change, I don't think I would bother doing that until we go through the other changes and additions and stuff. So thank you, Ben.
And I think Madam Chair, if I could, I think it would be great to have a chart of what data we do collect, where we collect it, what aspects of it are released. I mean, Ben, if you could do a chart of the changes and some of, I think that would help us as we deliberate the week we come back on this. Do you see what I mean? It would be great to sort of have one place where we have all of what we collect, who gets it, how, what are the rules around its release, and how are we using it currently? I mean, because I was thinking as we were having this conversation that of course the council also has data because it has data on officers that are being I can't think of the right word, but reprimanded is what I'm thinking of. I mean, there's a lot of data that we have around law enforcement that I just love to know how, as we go into this conversation, how it's collected, where it's housed, when it's released. I think that would be helpful, how it's used currently.
We can probably do that. That's a pretty broad request here, but I see Mike Sherling has his hand up.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just briefly for committee consideration as you go away for the break and ruminate on this. I've not seen anything in the draft that outlines any piece of data that isn't already collected.
Yeah.
And isn't already publicly available in some form or another. And going back 2 decades, we've worked with the U.S. Department of Justice on illuminating disparities in youth contact with the justice system. There have been a number of reports that have been done and made publicly available and have been written about in the media. The media consistently requests reports out of our computer-aided dispatch and records management system about types of contact, types of use of force. There's a host of things that have been illuminated over the years. And just to remind the committee where we're going with the new system that is just 2 months old now, is to create public-facing dashboards and publicly available raw data for researchers to look at. It's going to take some time to get those things stood up because they're the next iteration, next evolution of the system and our data dissemination efforts, but they are part and parcel of what we view as transparency, which historically has been the ability to query and look at reports about what government does, and less so about having this robust data sets available. So these are all things that are in motion now and have been for a really long time. So I would encourage you to
Right.
to really get in the weeds
Can
on
you
what is
email-
available rather than.
Can you email that data to the committee today?
Or the dash.
There's a website that you can go
I
to
whole
look it up.
Senator, I can't email you a multi-million line data set. What I'm saying is the ability to query data and create reports like those that you're interested in exists, and is done on a regular basis in response to a whole bunch of different things, whether it's research, occasionally legislative inquiries, media inquiries. It's a normal part of day-to-day business in government in general, but in policing more specifically.
So I would suggest that we do some more research on our own and then we come back on the 9th and we will look at this more and see what, if anything, there is that we need to do. And I think that we'll make sure that we have the commissioner and Aton. I know that your committee, and I get the initials wrong. It's RPAD. I got the initials right. I just didn't get them in the right order.
No, actually it was the reverse. It's RDAP.
Yeah, I knew I got
yes.
them right, but not in the right order. So, and because you're involved in collection of data and reporting and stuff. So we'll make sure that you're with us and everybody else who wants to come, and we'll send the invitation again to all the people that were on the list for today to make sure. And I did send, I know that Mark Hughes said they weren't going to weigh in on this today, but I did tell him that we would be taking it up next Wednesday and he would be welcome to attend. So,
Not next Wednesday, but
I mean, when we come back. Thank you. Okay, so I'm going to suggest that we once again jump our topic here. And I see Ameren is with us and has a new draft. And thank you to everybody. And we're going to 155, back to 155. Okay.
Okay, do you have draft 2.1 either posted or in your email?
It's post. Gail has posted it.
Excellent. All right, so I will skip down just to the changed sections. The first one is on page 2, changing the name to the Office of Community Collaboration and Empowerment. And then the next page is down on page 4, once again correcting the name to Office of Community Collaboration and Empowerment. Next change, I believe, is down in the full discussion of the office, which begins on page 11, I believe.
Yeah.
Bottom of page 10 into page 11, section 5284, Office of Community Collaboration and Empowerment. Subsection A, creation. The Office of Community Collaboration and Empowerment is created within the agency. Subsection B, duties, responsibilities. The Office of Community Collaboration and Empowerment shall. The first 3 are the duties that were already in this bill. 4, 5, and 6 are the new. Subdivision 4, create a system to periodically review all agency policies. That includes the use of the Equity Impact Assessment tool. Subdivision 5, define the relationship between the Office of Community Collaboration and Empowerment and the other offices, divisions, and departments within the agency. And 6, establish organizational structures that allow for meaningful community participation. Any questions on those before I move into the last language here?
No.
Subsection C is the report section. On or before November 1st, 2023, and every 2 years thereafter, the Office of Community Collaboration and Empowerment shall report to the House and Senate committees on government operations and on judiciary, and to the list of stakeholders identified pursuant to subdivision 3 of subsection B on the office's progress and implementation of the duties and responsibilities identified in subsection B of this section.
The only comment I have is it says every 2 years, and I think what I had thought was that it would be annually for 2 years. So it isn't every 2 years they report. It's that for the next 2 years, they have to report.
I see. Okay.
So they would file a report on 23, 24, and 25.
Okay. I should be able to fix that pretty easily.
Did everybody else understand it that way?
Yes,
Yeah.
just to get as we started.
Yeah.
Okay, that makes sense. I apologize.
No, we were a little scattered.
Okay, I'm going to go off camera and fix that, and then I will be right back.
Okay, great.
Oh, great.
Other than that, does anybody have any issues?
Nope.
There's a hand up.
Yep, Commissioner Sherling, is
I
that
think
your
that's an
old hand or a new hand?
I'm old and it's an old hand.
And I did get a note from Senator Polina, who, even though he isn't here, said that he was okay voting for this bill.
Maybe.
But I think it'll still go down as 01.
Yeah, it will be. He won't vote, but he was prepared to vote for it.
He could always come back online.
Oh, I don't want to interrupt his.
Oh, he may actually need that moment to escape.
No, by the time we get a hold of him and he answers his phone, and maybe he's having a wonderful romp with his grandchildren, and we don't want to bother him. And here's
Okay.
Ameren back again.
I'm back. May I screen share?
Yes,
Sure.
please.
Okay. Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, so I've changed the timing to read on or before November 1st, 2023, and annually for the 2 years thereafter.
Yep.
Perfect.
Excellent. Okay, so this will then become draft number 3.1.
3.1.
Yep.
Okay. Yes, Senator Collmore.
I'm ready to move.
Okay.
I would move that the committee vote out draft the amendment to S-155 contained in draft 3.1. Because it is a strikeout.
Yeah. So are we ready to vote?
Yeah.
I will say that this bill has gone through a lot over the past 4 years, and it has constantly been made a stronger bill because of input from people. So I think that we're at a good point. I hope others agree.
Yep.
I do.
And once again, your vision for this has helped steer it in that direction.
Okay, are we ready for the vote?
Well, I'll just say that I still have a lot of concerns that not about what is in the bill, but what's not in the bill after a major reckoning around racial justice and policing in this country. I think it could have been a more visionary proposal and bill. I think the way the public was engaged, we heard, was not as meaningful as a lot of people wanted it to be. I would rather know that pieces of S250 will pass first, because I believe that to have an office of collaboration and empowerment, you really need to have data. You need to have strong policing mechanisms in place. You need to have measures of accountability, and you need to listen to people. But I am going to vote for this bill in the good faith that we will continue to take up S250 and deliver meaningful reforms that make a difference to people around how they engage with law enforcement and their own sense of community safety.
Thank you. And I think that it isn't just S250. I think it's ongoing, and that there are other bills and other reports that we need to look at when we come back to continue. And I keep going back to 124. I don't remember what the act is, but S124, which was this kind of a comprehensive bill that did a lot of things, including changing the Criminal Justice Council and the disciplinary procedures and decertification procedures. And so I think that we need to continue our work.
I just don't want to forget that, you know, the only Black woman who testified today said that that process failed her. And that unless we check on our legislation and make sure it's actually working for the people who are most impacted and who it's intended for, then we are patting ourselves on the back without making a true difference for people.
Yep, you are right.
We want to make a true difference for people.
Okay.
You're right.
Are we ready for the vote?
Yes. Senator Clarkson.
Yes.
Senator Collmore.
Yes.
Myself, Senator Rum-Hinsdale, yes. Senator White.
Yes.
And Senator Polina is absent. So that's a vote of 4-0-1.
I further move that we vote out draft 3.1 of S155 as amended.
Senator Clarkson.
Yes.
Senator Collmore.
Yes.
Senator Rum-Hinsdale, yes. Senator Polina is absent. Senator White.
Yes, thank you.
4-0-1.
4-0-1. Okay. Thank you so much, Amarin, for all your work on this. I know that you've been working on this for the entire time you've been in the Legislative Council. So.
You're welcome.
And thanks to everybody who weighed in on this, and we will continue our work. This is not the end. We will continue our work and continue to, and I don't want to say change the culture and the policing in Vermont. I want to say continue to work toward ever improving. It's that it wasn't in terrible shape before, and I do need to make that clear, that we will continue to work on it, but we're not, it isn't that it was so bad before that. Anyway, never mind. Okay. I guess I will report this.
Oh, I think you should.
Unless somebody else is dying to report it. I don't see anybody
We don't want
jumping
anyone
up and down. Okay, so committee, I think that's it. And I would say as we come back in a week, that if we're going to try and finish up all the things that we have left over. And if people have, if any of you have people that are interested in testifying, because we have to finish the ethics, we have to address 250. So on any of the bills that are left, if you have people that want to testify, please let me know.
Yes, and I'm trying to get Pearson In case she wants Treasurer Pierce and Tom Galanka and any others together to move that bill forward, the divestment bill. So I know that's my homework for the week.
Yeah, because I think if we don't have suggested language
Yeah.
by Tuesday, that,
Well, yeah.
I mean, I know, but I think we have to,
Yeah, no, it's also, anyway, we'll find out who's available, who can work and what we're
Okay.
doing.
okay,
Okay, thanks.
thanks. Have a great
lovely
week off.
restoring week.
Yeah.